So accessibility is becoming an increasingly important part of everybody's work, and it's fair to say sometimes the tools haven't helped us in the past, but now the tools are really there. So it's all very well having the tools, but what about the way we approach accessibility in our everyday lives, in our everyday work, and particularly when we're planning to interact with colleagues and have meetings with people? Are we making sure that we're thinking about being accessible in the way we work? Now, Mike and I sit on a committee, and I'm going to ask Mike to perhaps explain the context and take us through where we're at and some of the things that we should be thinking about. So, Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Dave, and good afternoon, everyone. As you rightly said, Dave and I sit on with colleagues across policing a committee called the National Digital Accessibility Working Group. And the idea is to bring forces together to look at this area around accessibility and look at it in two ways. One, look at the different tools that are available to officers and staff should they need that help and support around different areas around accessibility. But the second bit, and the bit that really we want to talk about today, is how do we change that feeling and that culture around accessibility? How do we, when we're organising a meeting or sending out a document or a presentation, what have we done as authors and creators and as managers to make that event or that experience as accessible as possible? So what we're going to be looking at today isn't so much as I suppose the aspect from those that need that tool and that support, but it's from the other side of the fence. It's what we're thinking about, particularly if we're organising a Microsoft Teams event. What should we be considering when we're setting up the meeting, when we're creating a presentation, and during the meeting to really make sure that the event is as inclusive as possible? Now, I make no apologies. A lot of the stuff that you see is very basic. It's within the E3 license, and you may be familiar with them already. But I think if we take one thing away from today's webinar, it's how are we thinking differently to ensure that every single person who's involved with that meeting is getting the most from the experience? And are we doing everything that we can as possible to make sure that accessibility is there? So what I wanted to do is first of all, just have a look at the way before you set up the meeting. And again, as I said, you most probably are aware of these, but it might be worth just remembering these options that for you. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that meeting options is highlighted just here at the bottom. This is where you click in and you get access to all the different aspects that you as the meeting organizer would need to make sure that that experience is right for you, from who you let in through the lobby, allowed to bypass the lobby, or who you asked to wait, who's presenting, and so on. I just wanted to show this part here, which is the record automatically. Now, if you were to open up your meetings options, normally that is defaulted to no. As an organizer, one thing you should be thinking about is once the meeting is finished, have you got the recording so that people who may want to watch it again or to listen to it again have that opportunity where it is recorded so they can download and they can play it and use the appropriate tools to help them. So a little tip or a little piece of advice, hopefully that you'll take on board, is just make sure that record automatically is switched on, because what will happen, as we've all done it, we've started a meeting and then before we know it, we're halfway through and suddenly thought, oh, we haven't recorded it and we haven't got the transcription there. So just something to bear in mind when you're actually setting up the meeting. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the joining instructions. Now, again, this is down to you, and this may seem like common sense, but I think in all the time that I've been using Microsoft Teams, I've never seen anyone, both internally or externally, reach out and say, do you need any particular help or assistance to make sure that you are included and you have the opportunity to make the most part of the meeting? So a little suggestion again for you to take away should you want to use it. As you can see, the top line is your usual summary or overview of what the meeting is about. But I think it might be worth putting in just a little note to every attendee to remind them that the meeting will be recorded. So if they've got any issues or problems with that, they need to make sure that they let you know beforehand. but also that little question out to everyone to say, if there are any other additional considerations that should be taken to ensure that you can be part of this meeting and play a full part of the meeting, please get in touch beforehand. I go back to what I was talking about with regards to the culture. We need to just think about the individual and how they may feel by saying, I'm sorry, I can't hear, or I can't see, or I'm having difficulties following the meeting. If we can make it as acceptable as possible that people can just raise their wants and their requests, then it leads to a far more open, far more comfortable, and far more inclusive event for the individual. And I know, Dave, you do a lot of work around this as well with the communications teams that you work with. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how we can help with that cultural approach to improving inclusivity.
I think it is becoming more and more of an issue there, where we've no longer got excuses to do this. And I now disclose myself as a dyslexic communicator. I use some of the tools that we talk about a lot more, but also it's not just about people with actual accessibility needs. It's about people who may be on the go and join a meeting. I had a meeting the other day with some colleagues from the Home Office. One of them joined on mobile. They couldn't see the screen I was sharing. I only knew they were on the mobile once they told me, so I was then able to adapt the way I was running the meeting to be able to do that. If I'd known beforehand, I could have pre-circulated the comms so he could have read it beforehand that we were going to be discussing in that meeting. So it is a matter of us thinking about accessible first by default, and not assuming that everybody knows how to use the tools as well. And sometimes it's that taking a few seconds to highlight, as we do at the start of every live webinar, we highlight the accessibility tools in the webinar that's available so people can get the maximum most out of it. I don't actually include that in the recording because it's not useful in the recording, but those are the sort of things and behaviours we need to be thinking about adopting as we move forward.
Now, I completely agree, and I think we'll talk about this more as the webinar goes on. It's just changing the way we slightly think, and it's getting that opportunity to think about the audience. I know as chairs of meetings and organisers, the focus is on how are we doing it and why we're doing it, but it's also just thinking about the so what for those that are taking part. Now, there is another tool that's in 365, and it's available across not only PowerPoint, but it's also in Word and Excel, and it's called Check Accessibility. Now, the reason I've pre-recorded something on here, and first of all, the reason I pre-recorded it is I'm nowhere near as good as you, David, at the live demo. But what I wanted to show is that when we are creating a presentation for to show an event, and hopefully we'll circulate it both before or afterwards, there are some tools in there which will really help those people who will need that support around, in particular, how they don't have a great vision and great opportunities to read, where visual images can be described, and it's called through alt text. So if I can get the this bit running, oh, sorry.
I think you might need to click on the actual video, Mike.
Okay, thank you. There we go. See, could you imagine if I'd done this as a live demo, we'd still be stuck. So here's a PowerPoint presentation template. And as you can see from the cursor going across the top, it's highlighting the column called review. And again, sorry if you already know this, but I think it's worth looking at. You then have the thing called check availability, the option. And what that will do is it will run in the background. So as you are creating your document, it will constantly remind you of the things that you should be looking to put in as you're creating it to make sure it is accessible for all. So the first example I'm showing is if we were going to put a picture in. So I've just clicked into the live stock images that you can get, looked for a particular image, clicked on it, and as with PowerPoint, it will end up in the, once you insert it, it'll end up in the presentation. Now, if you follow my cursor over to the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that I recognize that there is a picture, but it needs some form of description. And that will be when you circulate the presentation, if someone is using Reader, when the particular part of the document falls on the picture, it will actually describe what you're seeing. Now, it may be an image that is part and parcel of your just background and your corporate information or corporate look. So you can mark the areas, mark as decoration, and what you would have just seen just then, it grayed out the opportunity to put a description in. But we want to put a description in, and as you can see, it's a soldier standing guard outside a monument. Now, there's two options that you can look at there. So you have the generate alt text for me, and you can click on that and it'll actually come up with a description. But that description wasn't sufficient enough for me. So what I wanted to do was put in a more detailed description. So when the individual is reviewing the document afterwards and they're using the reader, this is what will be read to the individual as they're looking at it. So I'm typing in my content in there, and I don't know if you can actually see on that, I've purposely made a mistake. It works just like spell check in any of the documents. It will highlight the fact that you have spelled something wrong, and then it'll give you the option, and you can then change it so it's accurate. And that's all there is to it. So that is now embedded into the document so that when the individual is reading it, that description will come up. Now, the next example is if we're putting in a chart or a bar graph. So again, I've just used a stock image for the example. And as you can see, as it's loaded, the difference on the right hand side with the box is that it hasn't generated an automatic description, because obviously the charts are very, very different, and they're usually from your own environment. So I have decided to put in a description there which explains that these are the top selling or top areas or categories across a 3-year period. And I will show you something just after this where I've actually made a mistake here. If you can make out what I'm writing, you will see that I've put in a description of the color. So for category 1, I'm going to say it's dark purple. Sorry, year 1's dark purple, year 2 is middle purple, and year 3 is light purple. Now, I will show you something in a minute which would have made me, or should have made me, change my description, because what I haven't done there is considered the requirements of those that are colorblind. So the description goes in, and that will be there for people to read as they are going through the doc or reviewing the document separately. We'll just, this is where I wish my typing was a little bit faster, but we're going to finish that. So that's embedded. When the cursor moves up, which will be in a second, on the accessibility, I've highlighted impact without color. Now, this is for you to review, particularly bar charts for those that are colorblind. So if you're colorblind, you can see the description I put in the box is completely wrong. So what I should be doing, and what I will do for future, is to go back, change that description, and then come back into the presentation. I don't know how many people use Check Accessibility. It's there for us all to use, and it's part of the many tools that are out there. But it really will help us just consider what needs to be put in, and it just prompts us to do it. We can ignore it if we want to, but it really is best practice if we fill that information in.
And I think, Mike, one of the important points is if it's worth adding a picture, it's worth adding a picture for the people who've got accessibility needs by writing a proper description. Because if you're going to the effort of putting some effort into this, for those people who can't see and are using audio screen readers, etc., this is exactly the tools that they're expecting to do. So you have to think about the audience. You can use the generative AI to describe the images, but they tend to add little value. And if you're using an image, if you've taken time to choose it, you've got to use it right and to make sure it works. Do you want to take us on to the next bit, Mike?
Yeah, thank you. So these are just prompts and tips that as a chair or as a lead of a meeting, we should be reminding folk on what we need to do. So if you see on the screen, the next slide is talking about reminding attendees to turn on live captions. And I know this is something that you do throughout the Wednesday webinar sessions. So it's just saying, here's an option for you to turn on live captions for yourself. So you can see it, you can feel comfortable, and you can follow the conversation that's going on. If we then look at another option. So in the more button or the more section, there is actually an area called for accessibility. And once you click on that, you have the option around hearing for sign language and captions. Now, I'm not going to cover sign language today because that is something that is quite rare. But if there is a force out there that is using sign language, we would really love to hear from you, not just for the webinar, but also for the Digital Accessibility Working Group, because this is an area we want to see if there's an opportunity to grow. But it's just here on the captions. By clicking on this button and taking it from the default no to a yes, it always gives you the live captions into your meetings. It's just something that, again, that you don't need to think about setting up. But as a chair, you should be suggesting that to your audience to say, if you need captions, there is the options there of just for this meeting or for future meetings.
And Mike, I've just forced live captioning on to people just for a second so they can see it. So I do want people to have the choice, but you can see how well it's working in terms of transcribing. It's using the same transcription engine as we use for the rest of the meetings.
It's amazing how accurate it can be. Yes, of course, every once in a while it may pick up the wrong word, but the captioning functionality is brilliant. So I really would recommend that. And just the last couple of slides, Dave, and again, this is something that you and I have talked about in the past with regards the meeting etiquette, setting the parameters as a chair to ensure that everyone does have the equal opportunity to take as much part in the meeting as possible. And one of the things that we've discussed in the past and others have is where do you draw that line between having that formal interaction to say I'm raising my hand to say I'll have a point, or I'm going to the questions in the chat bar, compared to perhaps keeping the flow going where people just interact and throw themselves in and start talking. I think it's important to remember that there are people trying to follow who is saying what, and people are trying to flow a line of conversation. So with practice, the whole hands up and chat bar can actually provide a really important way of not only ensuring everybody has an opportunity to take part, but also it keeps the flow of what you're trying to talk about, making sure you hit the objectives of the meeting and the agenda going full on. So again, as a tip, I would really recommend give the opportunity for people to raise their hands to ask their question, and also use that chat bar to look at what questions are coming up. I think it does help flow, and also and maybe this is a little bit of a pet thing of mine, it stops people jumping in while others are still talking. It gives people an opportunity to just reflect on what someone is saying. We're very keen to get our point across, and that's understandable, particularly if we're talking about something we're passionate about. It's just making sure that you have that opportunity to be seen and heard by everybody, and then bring your point in. And then just a final point on meeting etiquette, and it's the visual bit. It's that what people can see, and it's amazing. Yes, you've got the transcription, but so many people will rely on seeing who's talking and what they're saying, because there is an element of reading of lips. So when you have a meeting, and again, appreciate people sometimes don't like to put their camera on, or there is an element of bandwidth problems, and so they turn their video off and just listen. If you are going to speak, can you please recommend that people turn their cameras on so that people do have an opportunity to see what is being said? And again, if there's a meeting there's a number of people on board and all we've got is sort of little boxes, there is that opportunity to spotlight the speaker. So again, that gives the opportunity for that individual who is talking to be seen bigger on the screen, and then those that need it have that opportunity to read the lips. And when your camera is on, just have a look to see how you are being seen on the camera. There's so many different occasions when an individual is talking, but maybe it's because they've got the lighting behind them, or just the lightness in the room. They look like someone who's in a witness protection exercise, and all you can see is a silhouette. Whilst you're being seen, you're not being seen, if that makes sense. People can't see your lips, they can't see what you are saying. So Jen, just give that consideration to who you are and what you're doing on the screen itself. And then the final thing, and I know this is something you do fantastically well, Dave. You know, you've delivered these webinars from all sorts of locations, and all we've been able to hear is you, and you haven't had that background noise. And there is a noise suppression or cutting out the background noise. And on the screen, you will see that if you click into the settings section, you can actually open up an area which looks at what you are or how your equipment is working. And just here where we've got the level of suppression, its default setting is auto, so which is really good. The technology is fantastic. But there have been times when people have been in a middle of a conference or an exhibition, or they've been working from home and they've had a wall being knocked down behind them as part of home improvements. By turning it up to high, it really just focuses on you as the individual, and all that background noise is taken away. So again, something to consider when you are presenting or running a meeting. And that's the tips from me. I can't see if there are any questions, but again, if I can reiterate that point, Dave, that if people take one thing away from today, just be considerate about the audience that you have to be as inclusive as possible.
It is. It's just a little bit of additional thought that can add a huge benefit, not just to you as the meeting organizer, but to the delegates who are attending. There are a few comments and questions, and there was a few issues with the live demo of the forcing the captions in. But again, people have found it, and we'll let you into a little trade secret here. There is a comment there. They work really well. It's clever. It shows the text before it's actually been said live. That's a unique part of a live event. There's actually a 15-second delay between me saying now and you hearing now, and that allows the captioning to work. But on a live meeting, it is very, very effective. It does work. And one of the tips I've got, if you're having a hybrid meeting and there's a lot of people in another room on one camera, the live captioning can actually be more accurate than what you can hear through the headphones. So again, that can be a really good tip when you've got that sort of meeting where you can't always hear who's saying or what people are saying. A couple of other comments that are coming in. How do you spotlight a speaker in a normal meeting? You can't do it in today's webinar, but how do you do that, Mike?
So when you if you have the screen and you've got usually down this side of your screen the pictures of the individual, you'll see at the bottom of each picture the little 3 dots. If you click on that individual, it will give you the opportunity to spotlight the individual. Click on that, and what will happen is that their screen will come bigger. Another option is if you look at the people in the attendees list down the side. Again, that gives you the option to spotlight. It's a very simple and straightforward. And I must say, all of this that we've talked about in all these other areas, Microsoft have got huge amounts of information online. You just post the question and it will come back through to you. So go on to the Microsoft Help website and they will provide all that info for you.
Similarly to that one, if you're in a normal Teams meeting and you're lucky enough to have 2 screens, you can use the pop out button to pop the screen share out and still keep the full meetings on the other screen. That can sometimes work if there's a lot of detail being talked about on a meeting. There's a lot more in there. I think one of the points I always at play is, it's not up to when we get to publish a document to review the accessibility. It's as the document's being created, because you don't know the needs, accessibility needs of everybody who's working on a document. So why do you leave it till last minute and it become a publication? And one of the other points as well is, if you do all the accessibility in the Word document, that'll feed through when you create a PDF as well. So it's not a matter of having to redo effort in those points. Just on
that point very quickly, Dave, and I think I may have mentioned it, but when you have a presentation that's in a meeting, if you can, circulate the presentation beforehand, because again, that gives people an opportunity not only to prepare, but also they can access those inserted comments, and they're aware of what's coming up. So it's helping people prepare for the meeting in an inclusive way.
In terms of spotlighting, this question has just popped in is yes, it spotlights for everybody, but you can do various different things on this, but spotlight for everybody is one of the options there. Just conscious we're getting to the bottom of the hour. So there's a QR code there. Grab your phone, scan that QR code, or we'll pop the link on the screen as well for you. If you'd like to give us some feedback, this webinar was actually based on somebody who filled in this survey and told us they wanted to know more about the accessibility functionality in Teams and Outlook. So as part of today's content was based on your feedback. So please just do give us a feedback on the webinars. It helps us shape the way we're moving forward in the future. There's a few more things that we just want to highlight to you that's coming up in the very, very near future. Let me just get the right click. We have our redacting documents using the tools we've already got available taking place next week. We've got over 300 people subscribed to that event already. You know, it's on the PDS website. You can use the QR code on the recording if you want to join us for that session. And events coming up, we are still going strong on our webinars for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be reviewing last week's event in Staffordshire Police, who kindly hosted our event in terms of looking at neighbourhood policing. So we're going to be doing a review on that next week. And we're going to be constantly driving forward into the new year with some fantastic webinars and events, including the Innovation Today event. If you want to register to come along to an in-person event up in Merseyside, head over to the PDS website and you can then go to the events page and get yourself registered to join us. So that's a bit of a highlight of what's coming up soon. Mike, a closing message about events, about accessibility. You know, what's your plea to forces and colleagues who are working in forces today?
I think it's a simple one, Dave. It's, you know, we're really lucky that we're in a world where technology is helping us and it's improving our opportunities, it's improving the way we work. All I would suggest is that in the beginning, it's difficult to adopt a new way of working, difficult to change culture. It does take time and it does take people to move with it. But for a workforce that we all work with, where we all know someone who has some form of need of an accessibility tool or support to help them do the best that they possibly can at work, we've got to be considering those folk too. So persevere. Just think, as I said at the beginning, just think about what it is you want to achieve and how you can make it as inclusive as possible. Because the more people that are involved in the discussion and the decision making, the quicker we will get to new ways of working and new solutions. So just keep persevering with change of culture, change of ways of working, and ultimately give everybody the chance to play a part.
Everyone's a leader in policing. Just because we don't all do this right now doesn't mean it's not the right behaviour. So if you start doing this and involving this conversation, then others will follow, and that's how we make our service a more accessible and accessible business to be in. So thanks a lot to Mike for taking us through that today. It was a really important thing. I think you can tell the passion that Mike and I have for this area of business. You know, we do need to be thinking about this more and more and more. So hopefully you'll subscribe to our Wednesday webinars. Remember, if you're watching this on replay, hit the subscribe button, click the like, and then you'll get notified when there's new webinars available. And hope to see you at our next ones very soon. Thanks for joining us today.